I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 115. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hey everyone, welcome. How's it going? How's your September? How's rounding out Q3? This month has been a blast. The September sprint is in full effect, and actually as this airs, it'll be ending in just a couple of days. What an awesome month this has been. And then there is Mastery Group, which we are doing the strategic planning workshop for them to plan for Q4 in a really strong way. So by the time this airs, that will have already happened. And private client retreats. So every quarter we get in a room with each private client for 2 days, sometimes 1 day, depending on where they are on their track. And we hash things out. We review the last quarter. We look forward to the quarter coming up, make some really strong plans, reconcile the goals, where the actual versus the goal and how far do we have left to go. We do a bunch of math. We set goals, we set rocks, and get everybody fully prepped and ready to be able to hit the ground running when they go back to real life in their firm and execute. It's time to actually get to work on this stuff. So it is so much fun and in our new space. So when people come to us now, we have a really cool conference room, a really open, casual, loungy space that people can hang out in, and it's just the best. I feel so lucky to be doing the work that I'm doing. And I know I say lucky, like I've worked really hard to get Velocity Work to where it is. And the best part of all of it is how amazing our clients are. I'm not kidding. I mean, I'm in forums and I am in groups where I get to kind of be exposed to a lot of law firm owners and what they're up to, how they think, what's going on. And there is something really unique about our set of clients. And I am thrilled about it. I think having this podcast out for a couple of years, doing the classes that we've hosted, word of mouth, the kind of people that tend to be attracted to Velocity Work are the people who are willing to do the work, are people who are very interested in self-development, in professional development, and the growth of their firm, but not at the cost of them. And they're coachable, very open and willing to be coached and willing to hear things that will really, truly help them. They don't want a blueprint. They don't want a prescription. They want help in how to think and how to develop themselves. And that makes them incredible to work with. I just feel so lucky. If you're a client and you're listening to this and you don't already know, please hear me when I say I am so deeply appreciative for you. How you show up and the work that you do is truly inspiring. And it is fuel for me to continue to find ways to be more and more useful to you as a law firm owner. And to all the listeners out there who aren't clients, I am rooting for you. And I hope that this podcast can be useful to you on your journey. All right, turning the corner now. Let's get into the podcast today, which is titled Certainty is for Suckers. I cracked myself up. I mean, you're not really a sucker if you feel like you need certainty, but we are going to talk today about why you don't want to think of certainty as a good thing. You don't want to have to rely on certainty. And I'm going to go through this with covering a few points. The first is something that John Fisher wrote on Facebook, which really struck me and has to do with this concept of certainty. So I'm going to read that to you or share that with you. And then I'm going to share what came out of 2 different private client retreats this week that has to do with this topic as well. And then I'm going to round it out with something that Seth Godin said. I think I heard it like a year and a half ago, and I wrote it down because it stuck out to me so much. It really hit home. So I'll share that with you as well. The point of today's episode is to help you realize that certainty is not something that is good to shoot for. Yes, when we make projections about the future and when we're making plans to move towards something, we know what we're going for. But many people need this reassurance that it's going to happen in the time that they want it to happen. And the problem with that is that we don't actually have control over all of the variables to make sure that it happens in the time frame that you want it to happen. But you can go all in towards the thing, and you can do so much to influence results and to get yourself where you want to go. But we don't have control over all the variables. And so when you want certainty, you start to become weak, because if you are banking on certainty, you are banking on something that doesn't exist. Actually, I love the way Joey Vitale talks about this. Him and I have conversations about the difference between being committed to a goal versus being attached to a goal. It's almost like if you need certainty, then you are desperate for it to go a very specific certain way and in a certain time. And, there's very much of our control freak side of us comes out in those scenarios. And so Joey talks about the difference between being committed is, and I agree with him, being committed to a goal means that you show up and you take action until you reach the goal. Your commitment doesn't waver if it doesn't happen in the time that you thought it would. You keep going until you hit the goal. When people are attached to a goal, usually they aren't fully committed, which is so crazy, right? Like attached has a very desperate, graspy energy to it. And so when you are attached to a goal, it's like you need it in a way that's desperate. And that is not what commitment is. Commitment is a very grounded approach to your goal that I'm going to reach the goal no matter what, period. Now, we set quarterly goals, right? And this happens all the time. If you fall short of the quarterly goal, you don't make that mean anything. You keep going. You're going to hit the goal. So yes, we put time frames on things, and more than anything, that's so that you have a chance to lift your head, take a breath, evaluate things, make some smart calls, and then keep going. It doesn't mean failure if you fall short of a goal. And there's oftentimes you beat the goal in a quarter. So it's this difference between being committed to an outcome no matter what versus being attached to an outcome. And there is a subtle difference there. And many of you listening to this, I am positive, you know the difference. And I would evaluate, if I were you, what is it that you're bringing to where you want to go? Is it sort of this attached nature, or is it just a commitment to it? Now, I've talked about this kind of concept on the last couple of episodes about just this desperation and neediness from things just kills the game. And that's the way I like to think about it. When you have a goal that you set out and you're committed to it, it allows you to sort of play the game to get there. And if you are attached to the goal, or you have sort of this neediness about the goal, or this graspiness or desperation about the goal, then all of a sudden everything is taken so seriously. There's no room for creativity, or you have no vantage at that point because you're so myopically focused and taking everything so seriously, constricting down towards it. And that is because there's some part of you that is requiring certainty. And if it doesn't happen the way that you want it to, it will throw you off your game. It's almost like you try to make something that isn't certain, and that becomes a problem. So this idea of certainty, just reassurance is another way to think about it. Like, I want reassurance that this is the way to go, or this is going to work, right? That's not a part of the game. That's not how this works. The very nature of being an entrepreneur is a path that's uncertain. Now, listen, I have all the certainty in the world. Like, I believe really hard in the goals that I set, and my clients believe in the goals that they set. But there's 50 different routes to get to a goal. If you put the destination in the GPS, there is not one highway to get there. There's all these different routes you could take to get yourself to the end goal, the outcome that you're desiring. Well, and that's what makes it uncertain, right? It's like, okay, let's find our path there. I was going to share it later in the podcast. I'm going to share it right now because it fits really well. I had a client this week that had the best metaphor for this. We got through their retreat, and at the end, we were just like, oh, good job. This feels great. There's a plan for this quarter, et cetera, et cetera. But they have grown a lot in the last couple of years, and the team is bigger. The framework inside of the firm has had to shift. It's just been really amazing to watch the transformation of the firm and how they, as owners, are navigating that. And so at the end, she said, God, this feels like when we started, we had a 250 piece puzzle in front of us and we were working the pieces, just putting the pieces together. And now it feels like we have 1,000 piece puzzle in front of us and there's no picture. Like there's no blueprint for what it should look like. And that is, to her, she was saying, there's something about that that's so beautiful, but gosh, that is not how I thought this would be, right? And her whole point was there's so much uncertainty. Nothing is certain. And so the thing that you do is to show up and take the next best step, and then the next best step, and then the next best step. And opportunities present themselves that you couldn't have banked on. You had no idea, right? They present themselves. And then you take the next best step. It's like a fingerprint of a firm. It is very unique on how you grow. Very unique. And there isn't a right way versus wrong way. There's just a very awake and conscious way versus an unconscious way. And the awake and conscious way, where you are being as organized as you can be with the growth, and you are making the highest level calls that you can make, that is the way that you will piece together your 1,000-piece puzzle with no guide to go from. There's no box in front of you with the pretty picture on it. It's just, you have these pieces and you have to arrange them to fit together in a way that makes sense. And there's challenges with that. But listen, you're an entrepreneur. Would you really have it any other way? If you wanted predictability, you could go get a job. But you guys aren't doing that. You're not listening to this podcast if you're doing that. So there is a beauty in the uncertainty, and you have to allow yourself to see that. You have to allow yourself to see that this 1,000-piece puzzle in front of you that you're trying to piece together is such a privilege and at times really frustrating. You kind of run the gamut. But would you have it any other way? You keep showing up and it will come together. The puzzle will come together, but it's never likely, if we're going to run with that metaphor for a moment, which I loved, I think, it's worth saying, I don't think the puzzle's ever done. It just continues to build. And there'll be a day where you will start to see, the puzzle's never really complete because as you grow, there's more to figure out and there's more to piece together. But it does become clearer over time. And already for that firm, the clarity that they have about what is needed for them and to handle the growth that they're experiencing now, they're so much clearer than they were even 6 months ago, a year ago. And that's just going to continue to unfold and evolve. And it's all just a beautiful, a beautiful journey. So that was one thing I wanted to share with you, was that metaphor of the puzzle. I think many of you will relate to that feeling of the puzzle pieces are all right there. And now if you've grown, it's almost like, whoa, there's more puzzle pieces here and there's no guide. So let's get to work. Let's start piecing this stuff together. Pretty cool. So I wanted to share with you, John Fisher wrote a post, I think it was about a week ago now, like from the time I'm recording this. And it's titled, How to Make Magical Things Happen. And he tells this beautiful story. I'm not on Facebook that much in terms of just tooling around, but I like to read John's stuff when I see it come through. And I think Facebook knows that because it puts his stuff in front of me. He tells this beautiful story about how he was walking down the street with his son in Greenville, South Carolina. And his son said something. His son was like younger at the time, maybe 18 years old. And they're walking by an architectural firm. His son made a comment about how beautiful the building was. And so John said, let's go in and say hi. And his son was like, almost mortified. No, like what? You can't be serious. We can't just walk in there. And John said, I just walked towards the door and his son followed sort of sheepishly. And then they walked through the door. The receptionist greeted them. She introduced them to the managing partner. The managing partner walked them around. They met all these people that worked there. The managing partner sat in a conference room with them just to talk with them and get to know them for like an hour. And since then, they actually have become very close friends. At the end of the story, because he was talking about how beautiful this relationship has been and how much it's meant to his life. And at the end, when he's talking about thinking through, walking through the front door, he said, sometimes taking a chance is not risking anything. Instead, it's not taking the chance that's the real loss. And that is so beautiful. I mean, the certainty in that scenario is you just keep walking down the street, right? Like that's very certain. You don't take a left turn and go into a building because that's super uncertain. But the uncertainty of it all, like that taking the chance, and that's the reason that we say it's taking a chance, is because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. You're just taking a chance. And oftentimes people don't take chances because it feels safer to stay the path of certainty or seemingly certain, right? And what John is saying is taking a chance is actually not the risk. The risk is not taking the chance. Because if he hadn't taken the chance that day, there is a piece of his life that wouldn't exist today that exists in a very rich way. And I thought, what a beautiful way to sum that up. How often do we not take chances because it feels safer to do so? I mean, what a loss, right? Like if that's our MO, what are we missing out on? We don't even know. If you think about the podcast I did a few weeks ago with talking about Sir Alex Ferguson, he talks about making chances so that opportunities appear to be able to take and to go for. And so this is, to me, the same kind of thing. John veered off the sidewalk and was like, let's go in, which is kind of crazy, right? But he was making a chance that he could take. And so anyway, it's just such a beautiful story. And I wanted to make sure to share that because it does speak to our need for certainty, which feels safe, but it is an illusion because you can't know. You can't know what the right route is. So sometimes taking the route that gives you butterflies is almost like, is this crazy? That often can be the thing that opens you up to a different opportunity, a game-changing opportunity. I realize I just talked about John Fisher like everybody knows who he is, which I think I'm probably right that everybody does know who he is. But if you don't, John Fisher is an incredible attorney and human on the East Coast. He has a PI firm and he mentors people. He runs masterminds. He's just an incredible human. And I always love to hear what he's up to and what he's posting, what he's thinking. His stories are phenomenal. Another client that I led a retreat for this week is doing something very different. It's a very different model that he's going to be working inside of his law firm. And I'm so excited for it. He tried to poke holes in it in all different kinds of ways. He's thought this through. This is 100% something he's going to go for. And it is risky, right? Like, who knows? But this guy also is in a pretty solid place in terms of he doesn't need anything from his business. Of course, he wants his business to be successful, and it is. He has good profit margin. He has, like, everything is dialed in. And he's not in a position where it's not like he's going for this thing and he's thinking, well, this better work or else. That's just not his mentality. It's like, I think this could work. Let's go. Like, who knows? But I'm committed to it. So, like, he almost feels like the success is inevitable. Doesn't know exactly the timeline. He has projections, and we've walked through some of those things. But you can't know, especially when it's something new, right? So listening to him at the end, we were talking through just all the work, the map that was all over the walls. And he said, you know, what's funny, I was asking, like, is there a part of your brain that's like, what are you doing? This might be crazy. This, what's that voice saying? And he was like, no, I think, some of the investments I'm getting ready to make this work, it's a lot of money. It's more money than I've spent in the past. But also, I have the money. It's not like it's not there. And it's almost more thrilling and butterflies and like, I don't know how this is going to go, but we're going for it. There's fear there, but not paralyzing fear. And we were talking about that's because of the uncertainty. So I told him I was going to do this podcast called Certainty for Suckers. And we laughed together because the reason I say certainty is for suckers, I'm being funny with that, is because if you buy in to the idea that there is certainty with something, I mean, you're buying into something that isn't true. And so that's in my mind. I'm like, that's how our brain wants us to think. Our brain tries to cling to something certain. And that's not really how this works. And so if you can embrace the uncertainty and be willing to work through the uncertainty and learn how to live with the uncertainty, it's not that your success needs to be uncertain. People want the path to be certain. And that's where you get into trouble because you can't know that. Living in the uncertainty and really taking as much control as you can, right? Doing what you're supposed to be doing, taking the right action, being very conscious and awake on that journey so that you can make adjustments along the way. You'll get there. And on that path, that is where humans come alive. I mean, humans like playing to their edge, right? If you pick a path of certainty, that is not you playing to your edge. And we miss out on being fully alive and seeing what we're made of when we pick a path of certainty. Embracing uncertainty allows you to be more agile along the path and more alert and more awake. Really opening yourself up to that is such a gift, where if you pick a path of certainty, that you need to know that this is how the path is going to go. And so you're trying to control that and pick that. It squashes creativity. You're so myopically focused and you're so afraid of like you're being wrong about the path. Like all of that is not a great way to go, but it's so common. It's so common. And so that's why I wanted to do this podcast, because if you sense that this is what you're doing, how can you relax a little bit and start to embrace the truth of it instead of pushing against reality? Because the truth of it is that it's uncertain. We don't have certainty with how it's all going to look and be and timelines and all of that. How can you embrace the uncertainty? I'm not talking about perfection, just progress, like leaning into that a little more so that you can open yourself up. You have more vantage. You're a little more relaxed, still alert, but you have more of the opportunity to really see what you're made of on this path instead of trying to control everything in desiring certainty. I am going to leave you with a quote today by Seth Godin, who also actually was in a picture with John Fisher on John Fisher's feed this week. I should reach out to John. And how did that happen? I mean, maybe they're friends. I don't know. But okay. So Seth Godin on this podcast, I think this episode that I listened to was with Tim Ferriss, but I took this down. I wrote this note down because of how good it was. He is speaking to anxiety. And he gave a definition for anxiety that I hadn't heard before, but I thought was great. Anxiety is experiencing failure in advance. I mean, sit with that for a moment. How good is that definition? That's so good. And he goes on, he has more to say, but at one point he said, anxiety and worry is almost never about someone else. It is about our need for status quo and reassurance. Reassurance is futile, because you'll never have enough of it. If you're hooked on reassurance, you're screwed. That, my friends, I feel like mic drop, Seth Godin. I'm going to read it again. I really want you to sink in. What are you doing right now? If you're doing the dishes, if you're doing something else, just stop and listen to this. Anxiety and worry is never about someone else. It is about our need for status quo and reassurance. Reassurance is futile because you'll never have enough of it. If you are hooked on reassurance, you're screwed. That is why I wanted to do this podcast. And that's why I titled it in my own, tried to be funny way, Certainty is for Suckers. It's like you're buying into something that isn't real. It isn't a thing. Reassurance isn't a thing. And so if you are hooked on that, you're screwed. So good. Chew on that this week, my friends. Thanks so much for tuning in. I will see you here next Tuesday. Hey there. If you enjoyed this podcast, I highly recommend you come and check out Mastery Group. It is where owner attorneys come together to study this material, apply it, and thus create really big results for their firm and for their life. So come on over, velocitywork.com/join to get more information and get started. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.